Welcome back, everybody, to the first episode of the college football offseason. My name is Luca Maisie. Now, a little bit about me, real quick. I'm a current high school senior. I live in California. I grew up a Michigan State fan. Now I'm attending Iowa State for college, and I'm a reporter. I've reported for Stanford, for Iowa State, for Michigan State, all for Sports Illustrated on Three Rivals. But yeah, anyway, enough about me. Today in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the Mid-Atlantic Conference, better known as the MAC, or what many people say MACtion, because it's a really, really fun conference. So there's a lot I want to talk about. I'm going to go through, give my rankings, give some key players, give some stats to back up what I'm saying. And so yeah, super excited. If you guys are interested in this, let me know if you want some. If you want just some more content like this, I'm probably going to be doing conference rankings for each team and potentially more college football national news as we get into the regular season in a couple months. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it.
So, guys, I'm going to start here in what I believe is 13th place, and that is going to be, like probably expected, the UMass Minutemen. Now, I don't know if you guys know, but last season they were really bad. I believe they finished 0-12, had a really, really poor first season in their first year in the MAC, and it was definitely not how they wanted to introduce themselves to the conference, especially as a team that isn't really in the Midwest, like the majority of these MAC teams are. So definitely wasn't a great start for them, and unfortunately, I had to put them last here. They are ranked, according to some analytics on puntandrallye.com, which is where I'm getting a lot of these stuff, by the way, so shout out to them. They're ranked as the 138 out of 138th team in college football this season. Their offense is very, very poor, the second worst in the country. Their defense is barely better, the third worst in the country. And they're projected just 2.7 wins next season. I mean, I think it's hard to put them any higher than last place. I mean, the bottom of the MAC definitely is right, is very close to down there. But I think UMass takes the cake as the worst team in the conference. They don't have many dynamic players, and I think it's going to be a really tough season for them. In 12th, we're going to go with Ball State. Now, this one's a little bit more interesting. I definitely don't think it's as consensus as, let's say, UMass at 13. But the reason I go with Ball State at 12 is they really just, have very little talent. Their defense is even worse than UMass is actually at 137. Their offense is, right there with some of the worst in the country at 132. They also don't really have any talent at all. They're also projected 2.7 wins. Very, very similar to UMass. The interesting thing is, Ball State over the last couple of years, I'm not going to pretend they've been an amazing team, but they certainly haven't been near a level of a UMass or a Kent State or an Akron or some of the teams, completely at the bottom of the conference. So I find it a little bit interesting that they're listed so low, and I think they just kind of lost a lot of talent, and I'm kind of riding that wave that's going down. So yeah, I got Ball State at 12. This is where things get weird. At 11, I'm going with Kent State. Now, if you guys know, Kent State is pretty consistently one of the worst programs in college football. I believe it was 2 years ago that they went 0-12. Maybe it was 3 years ago. Maybe they even went back to back. I don't really know, but they've been really, really poor the last couple of years. But I will say they went 5-7 last year, 4-4 in the conference, and it was, I wouldn't say one of like the national shocks, but it certainly was a shock to some of us Group of Five fans, some of us Maction fans. That was like, whoa, like is Kent State not that bad? And a lot of that was on Drew DeShields, which is their quarterback and their leader. So he's actually returning a second year. Unfortunately, I think the MAC got a lot better, and outside of DeShields, I don't think Kent State really got better in any sense. The offense is okay, defense is a little bit worse, but near the bottom 10, bottom 15 nationally. And so Kent State, I don't think they're a terrible team. They're projected to get 3.7 wins on punt and rally, which is pretty low, but I can see four. It's really hard to say, but I think I just have them this low just because I think there's a couple teams above them that are better. At number 10, we have one of the most intriguing ones. Me being a Northern California guy located in the Bay Area, Sacramento State's pretty close. It's kind of a big story around here. And they finally make the jump to the FBS. Now, did I ever think that I was going to be in MAC country? Not at all. But I guess here we are. Sacramento is now a MAC school. So I'm really excited to see how they do. I believe it was 2 years ago they went 3-9, which is really bad at the FCS level. Last year they went 7-5. They they made some strides, but it's been a couple of years since Sac State has been the dominant team they once were, and so I don't think they're going to be very good in the FBS. I will say though, they do have a decent defense compared to some of these numbers they've looked at before. They're sitting at 109. Offense not as much. They're at 119. They don't really have any guys that like really stand out either. It's just kind of a lot of money in their project to build a new football stadium, use all this money on this and on that. So I don't hate Sac State. I think it's going to take them time to settle in. I don't think there's teams that really realize the difference between the FBS and the FCS level, and I think Sac State is definitely going to be a victim of that next season. Now we get into number 9, and I think there's a big, big gap between the bottom 4 and the rest of the conference. I have Buffalo here. I think they're a pretty good team defensively. They're actually really strong, led by Miles Greer, who's a safety, who I really, really like going into next year. They're actually projected to make a bowl game on Punt and Rally at 6.2 wins, which is going to be interesting. They have kind of a favorable schedule. They have a defense that can hold them in games, especially in a conference where there's not a lot of offense. I think that Buffalo will be holding teams to 2 touchdowns to 3 touchdowns pretty often. And Buffalo's always just been, the hardcore city, the city that, plays good defense. And, I think they're going to do that again this year. Unfortunately, similar situation to Kent State. I just think there's teams better than them. But in terms of, if they're playing, I don't know their schedule at the top of my head, but if they're playing any of those bottom teams, I think those are kind of surefire wins. I think they can keep it close with some of the higher teams, but unfortunately, I think, it's just kind of a victim of, a couple teams ahead of them that are better. Next up, we got Eastern Michigan. Now, I am a big Eastern Michigan guy. I like the factory. I like the gray field. I think it's pretty cool. Shout out Ypsilanti. But overall, I don't think they're going to end up being any of those top, being really a top team in the conference. I do think that their defense is pretty solid, and I like that. And one thing that I really like with this team is their quarterback and wide receiver duo. I think that always goes a long way, especially in college football. Having Noah Kim at quarterback, he actually used to play at Michigan State back in the day. Played for Eastern Michigan. He did pretty well last season. Now he returns for another year. Then they also have Nick Deverio, or I don't know exactly how to say his name, but he's also an intriguing guy. I believe he returns for another year, and so Kim Devereaux another year together. I think we'll make Eastern Michigan a pretty good team. But yeah, we'll see. I think they're in the same realm as Buffalo. They're expected to have 6.7 wins on the season, so kind of in competition for a bowl game, similar to Buffalo. But we'll really see what happens. Next up is Bowling Green. Now, if you remember from last year, I believe Bowling Green was actually like near the top of the conference throughout the majority of the year, but they really dropped down. I think they were like in the bottom 3 of the conference by the end of the year, which is crazy considering, what a good start they have and what a program they have. I believe the Doy is their stadium, and they have a good fan base. I like, their colors, the program that they've built recently. The only interesting thing about them this year is they're going to obviously, they had that massive downhill and they're going to try to pick it back up. And I think they'll be a pretty solid team. They have a decent offense, decent defense, nothing to be too proud of, too ashamed of. They're actually expected to go exactly 6-6. So we'll see what happens. I think they're just a very, very neutral team. I think, they don't have the pop that Eastern Michigan has. They don't have the defensive stability that Buffalo has. But I think just overall, the name, the program is a little bit of name tax here, but I do think I do think Bowling Green actually is really kind of that middle ground of, who are the good teams in the conference, who are the bad teams in the conference, and they're kind of the perfect middle ground. Then we got Akron, who in my opinion is the biggest sleeper in the entire conference. Now last year, it very similar situation to Kent State, how they were really poor years ago, were, I don't know, 2-10, 1-11, had some really, really bad seasons back in the day. But last year they were actually 5-7, so literally like the exact same thing as Kent State. Now the difference between Kent State and Akron is that Akron has a really, really good, really, really solid squad this year. They're ranked 120 overall, 115 on offense, 120 on defense. They're only projected to get 4.8 wins, which is really, really low. But that's, I'm really high on them. I think they're a very traditional, like, kid type of team. Like, you see, oh my God, Jordan Gantz, their running back. He's going to be really dynamic. Oh my God, they have 2 really good wide receivers, Marcel Williams and Kyan Mason. Like, they have really good, like, they have like the guys that you watch on TV. You're like, oh my God, that's so cool. But not, they don't have the O linemen, the D linemen, the linebackers that you really need. But they have the flashy guys, and I kind of like that. I feel like in a conference like the MAC, they call it MACtion for a reason. You need the flashy guys in a conference where it's all about the hard work and the dirty work and all that stuff. You need a couple guys that are going to shine. And I think Akron's definitely going to be one of the top teams when it comes to just like, I want to watch them play football, right? Thursday night, Friday night, I want to watch Akron play football. And that's exactly how I feel. That's why I have them so high, which is, I believe, at 6. And I think they're just, right around a bowl game. I think they make it, even though their expectations are kind of low, just because I really like the pop that they bring to a conference like the MAC. It's now been 2 years since the Ohio Bobcats have been dominating the MAC conference. They won the conference championship 38-3 back in 2024. Shout out Parker Navarro, one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch, like in the last couple of years of college football as a whole. I have them at 5 this year. I think in terms of like the rating, they're only at 117. And their offense is not good, but their defense is really, really solid. It's ranked 3rd in the entire conference. And they have some really good guys. Charlie Christopher is kind of the leader of that defense at linebacker. They are projected only 5.9 wins, which is a little low. And it's kind of funny, like the way that some of these lower teams have really favorable schedules. Some of these higher teams don't. But regardless, I think Ohio rolls, having a really good defense. I think, or not really good, but a good defense for the conference. I think definitely matters a lot. And then offensively, they actually have some interesting guys. Matt Vezza, they brought from, I think it's New Hampshire, some sort of FCS school. And then they also bring in Duncan Brune, who I think will be an interesting guy as well. So I have him at 5th. Next up, we got Central Michigan. Now this team is similar in certain ways to a couple of these other teams, is that they have a really, really good one side of the ball, really bad other side of the ball. Now their offense is ranked 2nd in the conference, just behind Miami, Ohio. They're ranked 75 in the country, which is actually pretty good. I think better than a couple power conference teams. But their defense, 113. It ranks pretty low in comparison to other teams in the conference. Even like a Sac State has a better defense than in Central Michigan. So they'll be a fun team to watch. They have Langston Lewis and Brock Townsend, a couple other of their key like offensive weapons, similar to Akron in the way that they're just, like they're kind of like the kid team, as I like to say. It's like, they have the good wide receiver and the good running back, and those are some guys that I think will give them a little pop. They have a decently favorable schedule, 7 projected wins. I think they could be pretty solid. They'll make a bowl game, but unfortunately, I think they fall a little bit short of the conference championship game. Now we get to, I think, the most controversial one on this entire list, which is Western Michigan at 3. I know some people probably love that. Some people probably hate that. Obviously they came off the conference championship last year. I think they were 9-3. They had a really, really good season. Underrated the way they kind of bounced up in the middle of the year in the conference and ended up, taking the conference by the throat, and then obviously winning the conference championship over Miami, Ohio. So they're ranked 102 in terms of like overall production, which is I think 4th in the conference. So not they're not expected, I would say, to win the conference again. They have a really good offense though, which I like. Brock Lowry comes back. He's rated pretty highly, I think. In terms of MAC quarterbacks, a lot of people really, really like him. I got to see more. I mean, he's been good, but I think you have to see more of it. Jalen Buckley, the running back, is also intriguing. Balin Brooks at wide receiver. A lot of good skill positions, like I mentioned before. Good quarterback, wide receiver, running back, whatever. The problem I have with Western Michigan, though, is on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, I don't think they were very good defensively. This year, they're ranked 115, which is like bottom 5 in the conference. Really, really not good. I mean, Central Michigan, they're very similar defensively as Western Michigan. They do have Scoop Gardner on the defensive line, which I think will help them a little bit. But if we're talking overall, a good offense, really bad defense, I just don't think it's enough to get it done. Their schedule isn't very favorable. They're projected 6.9 wins, which isn't as high as you would like from a team coming off the conference championship. So unfortunately, they're right there, but they're gonna miss out on the conference championship in 2026. Next up, we got Toledo, who finally is going to make the conference championship game in my predictions. They obviously are a powerhouse in the MAC. I think that's fair to say. I think it's fair to say Toledo's one of the powerhouses of the MAC. They'll always have a good team. Last year they were really good. They went 8-5. I think they were like right there with Western Michigan and Miami, Ohio for making the conference championship game, but unfortunately they just missed out. But Toledo, I like a lot. Their defense is second in the entire conference at number 64 nationally, which is crazy high for a MAC school. 77 defensively, which is just behind Western Michigan being third. But overall, they're ranked 72, which is second in the conference. I really like Toledo. They have CJ Miller at running back, who I like, Julian Fox at linebacker. Good kind of, they obviously, they're obviously a defensive team, but they have their offensive promise. I wouldn't say they're super one-dimensional, like in terms of, better offense, better defense, which I like a lot, and I think that matters a lot for a team that really wants to compete when it comes to conference championships. So I have Toledo at 2, but unfortunately, they're not going to win the MAC championship this year. That leaves us with the final team in the MAC preseason power rankings, which are the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. They just came off an awesome basketball season where they practically went undefeated. Unfortunately, lost in the March Madness, but absolutely like ran through the MAC, like was hitting buzzer beaters, all this stuff. And now in football, they're ready for a conference championship. They just lost it last year to Western Michigan in the conference championship, but they are, I think, by far the best team. Not by far, but they're a decent bit, I think, the best team in this conference. They're the best defense. They're the best offense. They're the best overall roster. I think Rodney Nelson's going to do a ton for them at running back, which I like a lot. They have a really favorable schedule. They're supposed to get over 9 wins this year, 9.2 to be exact. And I'm not going to say I think they're a college football playoff team. I really don't think they are. In a 24-team playoff, maybe. But in a 12-team playoff, I don't really see it. I just don't think that they have enough. But I think they're right there. I mean, I do think they're going to win the MAC. I think they're the best team. Maybe not the most complete, but the most star power. I think offensively and defensively, they're just good enough that they'll get it done. And so, yeah, I have your 2026 MAC champions to be the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. Yeah, there we are. Thank you guys so much for listening to my first episode of my preseason standings or power rankings or whatever you want to call it. I'm probably going to do the CUSA, some of these other group of 5 conferences, potentially get into power conferences ones as well as we get through this off season. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys next time.